What's up, guys? So today on the podcast, Eugene and I talk. We originally were going to do a little Patreon, a little back-end thing, but as often with what we do, we end up going on tangents. This one starts off with an interesting topic that I've been sort of diving into, which is about figuring out the deeper reasons as to why we train, in spite of all the difficulties and the potential injuries and all this stuff. But it also goes to one of my students who recently won, or he took third at the Worlds. And a heartfelt message from him. He was about 4 years ago. He was homeless. He just got out of prison. He had a drug charge. He was a felon. You know what I mean? And he used jiu-jitsu to change his life around. And so we kind of talk about that, and we talk about all kinds of other stuff. So I'm sure if you guys enjoy the rambly nature that we often sort of share through this podcast, and you'll love this episode. Guys, real quick, as always, if you want to support the podcast, check out the Patreon, where we do put some non-47-minute long episodes of extra content on there. You can go there, the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And then if you want to check out CBD, go to charlottesweb.com and use the promo code Chewjitsu. Save 15%, not 10, 15. And you can buy yourself some of those delicious and helpful gummies to aid in your recovery and help improve your sleep cycles and things like that. Stuff that, again, I felt that. And so maybe you don't, because I know it doesn't work the same for everybody. But for me, it's been a big one. So with that said, let's get started. So recently, Frank, one of my students, he posted this really heartfelt message, and I'm saying my students, my students, one of our guys, he posted this really heartfelt message on Facebook, where he would talk about 4 years ago, he just got out of prison, he was a felon, he was an ex-drug addict. His felony charge was related to him possession of a drug, and he said, basically everybody that he knew had just kind of written him off. He was homeless and all this stuff. He came into the gym, and then he said that the gym, not only he ended up winning a medal at Worlds, but he also said he's like, they changed my life, Joe and all these guys, whatever. And it was interesting because a bunch of people shared that, and most of them were just saying stuff, or positive stuff. But a couple people were posting things like Jiu-Jitsu saves lives. And I remember looking at that, I was like, no, they don't. No, it does not. It's not Jiu-Jitsu, right? Because if, let's say, Frank had trained Jiu-Jitsu in the basement with his buddy, doing stuff, it wouldn't change anything. Let's say he went to a gym where the people judged him very harshly based upon what he had done before. It wouldn't have changed anything. If he had gone to a gym where he basically got thrown to the grinder too quickly and got hurt and injured and couldn't keep training, wouldn't have changed him. So it's not jiu-jitsu. So just like when you and Lachlan were talking about the deeper inner workings of what's going on when you're armbarring someone. When you're armbarring someone, or when you're twisting someone in a heel hook, you're not just twisting someone. It's these ligaments that all interconnect, blah blah, and the medial thing on the foot, and then all this the ACL, all this stuff, right? Whatever. You guys are talking about this stuff, and you understand the inner workings. With me, I'm just I know that this does this, and I know this tightens it up. I don't know the deeper inner workings. But when I've been on this kick for probably about a year now, where I really am trying to get at the deeper meaning as to why people do certain things, jiu-jitsu being one of them, but it's not the only thing, but why people go through these things, right? Because it doesn't, when you look at it on the surface, it doesn't make any sense. Why am I going through this thing where I'm putting myself in physical harm, and you're just battering yourself and you're physically exhausted? Why? Why do you do that? And why do we do certain things for instance, why do kids get into gangs and stuff like that? Why do they do this? And so I've been to this I think I find it very interesting, but this idea of initiation rituals, passages of transformation. And so when you look at jiu-jitsu, I'll come back to what is actually going on there. When you look at jiu-jitsu, this is the way that I see it. And again, this is not necessarily this is not fact or anything, but I find it a useful idea. When you look at jiu-jitsu, it resembles a lot of these old rites of passages where people were coming from one end of the spectrum to another, right? Transforming.
Sure.
Because there's three basic things that sort of happen there, right? The first one is you have submission, right? Submission in jiu-jitsu, literally you submit to your you submit to people by tapping, yes, of course, but you submit to the process of it. The martial art, you submit, you say, listen, I'm going to give myself to this thing because I trust it. I'm going to submit to it. But you also, when you walk in the door, you submit your ego, your self-construction as to who you are outside. When you come in, it doesn't really matter because you have to submit yourself to the group communitas, is the way that one guy said it. And that group communitas is basically a sort of togetherness, a certain equality that exists where it doesn't matter who is the person outside of there. What matters is who's in here and who you are here. That person, it's different. So that's why, like when Frank came in, yeah, he was a guy that just got over being homeless, whatever. But he stood line in line next to people that were, maybe driving a Mercedes. Maybe the woman had a small business or whatever was going on.
Right.
He was equal to them. He was just another one of the people. The second sort of thing to that sort of rite of passage is containment. Basically, you have to be in a space where it's contained, and whatever's going on there is contained in that space. So when you go into a gym, it's contained there. The feelings that we have, the aggression that we let out, the sort of techniques that we use, they're contained in that space. We don't go just walking out down the street and take people down, right? It's contained to that space, confined to that space, and that's important because the third stage is sort of enactment. And during these rituals of transformation, these enactment periods are where people then begin to play with certain personas or play with different sides of themselves that maybe they can't in normal places, right? So for instance, with us, when you look at it on the surface, we're training, rolling, whatever. But beneath all that, you have all these feelings going on: self-doubt, frustration, anger, excitement, joy, happiness. I mean, the whole gamut, right? Think about competitions. You go through this, and those in themselves are a transformative experience because you go through there sometimes and you feel self-doubt, you feel fear, and then you go through there and you realize that there's someone else besides who you thought there was. You get to play with a new side of yourself that you didn't know existed, right? And that's what happened with Frank. He came into a situation where he'd been surrounded with negative people. He came in, and we didn't judge him, and I'll tell you right now, I didn't really like Frank at first because he came in and he was wearing the the I want to fight tap out douchebag uniform.
He said in his post, he said like I wanted to be an MMA fighter. He came to the gym to be an MMA fighter, and he even said I may have wanted to do that for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And yeah, you kind of have people like you kind of question like why do you want to be an MMA fighter? Like what do you? I mean, are you doing it for money, for fame, for girls? What are you doing it for? Like, what's your purpose?
What I think's going on there in a minute.
Sure.
But yeah, so exactly, he came in there. I don't think for the right reasons, and but he came in, and I didn't like him at first. But at the same time, with my position as it is, it's not my place to judge. I just because whatever, that's not my place to do it. Like I have a mission there, and regardless of who comes in, like. I'll work with him. And the bigger reason, though, is that I really like this quote from Abraham Lincoln that says, I do not know this man, or I do not like this man. I need to get to know him better. I do not like him. I need to get to know him better. And so many times has that proven true for me where I got rubbed wrong by someone, like, someone came across as kind of off to me or whatever. And as I got to know the person more and more, I really liked them. And so to me, typically, if I don't like the person, I try to get to know them more. Because if I can get to know them a little bit more, not always, sometimes not, but a lot of times I end up being like, it's not so bad, right? But sometimes there are people just assholes, whatever. But a lot of times they're all right. But he comes in, he starts training, he goes through the process, and again, through that process, he's going through all that what we just talked about. He's being able to leave that ex-drug addict, felon, blah blah blah, whatever, out there at the door. He comes in, and he, over time, it was actually a struggle at first for him to kind of just let go of all that inflated ego, that sort of a feeling of having to puff your chest up kind of thing, because he struggled with that at first, but he let it go eventually. Became one of the group. Then he's training, and people are lifting him up, and then he's surrounded by a group of elders. And that's one of the things with, again, any sort of sacred ritual, where they would take women, like the older women in tribes would take the younger women and show them what it meant to be a woman. The older men would take the younger men and show them what it meant to be a man. Yeah. Now, there's weird stuff in some of those rituals that obviously I don't want to recreate, but that eldership is important because we live in a society now where we don't necessarily do that. We don't look at our elders and say, hey, show me. Right, and we very rarely come into contact with older people that are not our parents or direct family that are willing to say, hey, let me show you something, right? But jiu-jitsu a lot of times ends up becoming, at least it was for me, and I see it a lot of times in the gym where we have guys inside the gym, and myself included, that do that where, if you have someone, they don't mind taking a second out to help. Or sometimes, like, some of the guys will use their professional skills to assist someone in a situation, just to help them out. And again, that eldership is important because those people have life experiences. They're valuable. A lot of the guys in the gym and a lot of guys that are out there, they've been through stuff. You know, a lot of the women have been through stuff, and they can share those experiences to these people. And that's something that lacks, you know. And so Frank was able to do that. And then with, you know, guys like Joe and I, who, again, we see him every day, you know, and it wasn't always nice. Like there's times where we had to like give Frank some tough love, you know, but we did it out of care for him, not out of like don't like the guy. But that's the thing. Like it wasn't jiu-jitsu, it was people, right? A guy, one of I sent this out in an email the other day, or yesterday, and the guy Mike, his name's Mike. He sent me a message back, and he runs a rehabilitation place and he co-leads it or whatever. And he says that they have a saying: "Hurt people, hurt people. Changed people, change people." Right. So when people come into the gym, I've been changed by the impact that I've had with other people, by the fact that I realized that there's other sides to myself that I never knew existed, and it wasn't until like I dug into them that I saw them, and I was able to realize them and realize I have a certain power that I never realized, right? So then when people come in, I'm like, I'm going to try to do that to you. I'm going to try to make you realize things that you didn't think you could do. When Frank was one of those guys, like, you know, I told him my message, because I was sick that day, and I didn't actually get to go to Worlds, so I'm giving everybody their like little like motivational message by text or whatever while I'm at home. And his was like, look, bro, stop thinking. You're so much better than you think you are. Just go out there and do it, you know. And that was a cool thing. So to see that message was cool, but you know, it's a cool thing for him. And so, but I think it wasn't jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is a catalyst, and there's other ways that you can do this. You can see this with people go to yoga. You can see this through people go to the military. You know, there's tons of places where people go in and they go through a sort of ritual of transformation.
Yeah.
And they will say, it changed my life. But it's not that. It's that is the catalyst. But it was, if you look at it, I almost always imagine that there's probably some leadership there that helped guide those people through it, whether unknowingly or not. Right? A lot of us do it. Like, I didn't think about this for a long time. I've been doing it for a long time. I never thought about it in the way that I think about it now, but I'm realizing what it is. Just like, you know, you might have been doing an arm bar before you went to PT school and you started, oh, this is what's happening in the arm bar, right? Now I'm understanding the inner workings, because when you look across cultures and time, initiations, passages, and rites of passage have always existed. Like, and it's not something that one of them, like, it's not something that Eastern culture came up with. It's not something that Western culture came up with. They all had them. Right? So it's like, what is that? It's almost like language, right? Like everybody has a language. It came up with it. Even people that were separated. Now there were like origins, right? Oh, this was the one, wherever. But, you know, the idea behind it, I guess sort of the theory is that it's wired in our psyche, right? That we have this yearning for it. And so we create them. It's like someone, if you read Stephen King's memoir, he was talking about the books that he wrote in the 80s when he was addicted to drugs. He said every one of them was about a writer who was in a really bad situation. And he said that later on he looked at him when he stopped using the drugs and realized that those books were really about the internal struggle going on. He was the writer, and he was faced with some dilemma, and that struggle was with the drugs that he was trying to kick, you know. And so the subconscious of his thinking became put down into these stories. And so these rituals then become a subconscious thing where we do these things. And, you know, the theory behind this for some of the psychologists and some of the anthropologists and stuff like that get into them is that the reason why you have all these gangs and all these things is because you don't have that leadership anymore. You don't have that, and you have a world of initiation hunger where people are looking for it. They feel it. And it's not like it's limited to young people. I mean, you get older people that come into the gym and they're drawn to it. And Frank was in his late 20s. Comes into the gym and he's like looking for something, just looking for it. Couldn't tell you what it is, right? It's not something you can just quantify like with a study, you know, or something like that. Like you can't like, well, it's this much. You can't do it. You got a hunger for something. What is that? And you feel this need, and then he comes into a place, and all of a sudden you have, you know, generativity from other men and older men that are there that are like, hey, yeah, come here, man, let me help you out a little bit, you know. And it's something that a lot of times is not felt. You know what I mean? And so it's one of those things where I think if you do it right, if you're a coach and you understand that, like the power that you wield there, you can change someone's life irreversibly if you come to grips with that. And so again, I just thought it was interesting, you know, because again, I'm on this kick with learning more about these ideas, and but I saw that jiu-jitsu saves lives. I was like, it's not jiu-jitsu.
It's the community. The jiu-jitsu is the catalyst, like you said. It's what gets you into the door, so to speak. But then you have the community of people, like you said. You know, at our gym, we have a lot of different people from a lot of different walks of life and a lot of different age background, age groups, a lot of backgrounds. Everybody's different, because I think when you come in and you're somebody that struggled and then there's nobody at that gym that struggled, you're gonna have a hard time relating on both sides. Like if you're somebody that struggled with drugs or whatever, and there's nobody there that has dealt with a struggle similar to that,
or just a struggle period.
exactly, they're not going to be able to relate. You're not going to be able to bridge that gap. Even if you're like a really good person, I think there's going to be an aspect that's missing. But that's what like we always talk about our gym and the uniqueness of our gym. It's the environment and the community. The community is very diverse, and in that aspect, it's very kind of open, because everybody, you have to kind of respect everyone because you deal with everyone. And then so maybe he went to another gym, he may have not had this, maybe he would have went ahead and fought in MMA and had some fights, and then it would have been done. But like this provided something for him. I've talked to Frank before. I think we were in Nashville, we were doing the team training, and me and him were kind of talking for a little bit, and it was just there's a lot, like Frank, there's a lot that I think is going on that he's thinking about, that he, and it's nice. It's nice that he's got a healthy outlet for a lot of those things and a lot of healthy support.
Well, even think about like you, like a lot of times, like someone's like gets injured.
Yeah.
And then they say, hey, Eugene, can you look at something for me? Yeah, I'll look at it for you. I mean, where is someone going to run into on a daily basis a PT that says, yeah, man, I got you. Let me take a look at it real quick. That's a community of people that are coming there. We live in a disconnected world. We live in a ultra like virtually connected, but a incredibly disconnected in real life world.
Right.
Like we don't have communities all the time. I mean, some people do. Some people are still part of them, and they're incredibly like beneficial. But a lot of times people don't have big groups of people where they're exposed to different views and ideas and different types of people. They don't have places where they can come and actually in face to face on a regular basis, meet with people and talk with them and be on equal footing. I mean, imagine that. Like, it's like if you go to a concert, right? When you're at the concert, you don't know what anybody does for work. You don't know how much money they make. You don't know anything about that person. All you know is that they have the same crummy t-shirt on for the band that they like, that you like, right? You could be sitting to a millionaire. You don't know, right? And you can talk on equal footing because you're there. You're going to sway to the music the same way well, maybe not the same way, but you're going to sway to the music, as they do, just because you're hearing it, right? It becomes this group feeling. And it's the same thing when you go into the training, because again, like, I learn more about people over time, but I don't know a ton about people as far as what they do for work. I'll ask them eventually as I get to know them. Right. But like when people come in, I don't ask them, hey, like, what do you ask people when you're outside and you're like meeting? Oh, so what do you do for work? Because we're trying to identify each other, right? What part of town you live around? Whatever, all this bullshit, right? So like a lot of times, like I'm just like, hey man, what's up? What brings you in? Yeah. Why are you here? Let's hear it, because look, what do you want from this? And a lot of times people, like sometimes they have reasons, like they want to get in shape or whatever, but sometimes they don't know. Sometimes they don't know. And I think it's interesting where you see these men and women both come in at like a later age, and it's the exercise, yes, but it's mixed with like the there's a learning aspect to it, yes, but then they get this group aspect that they enjoy. There's all these things going on. I mean, I think this is why like sports are so important, right? Because like, you think of sports gives you some, like, I remember wrestling for me, like when I was a kid, you as a boy, you grow up, don't be aggressive. Don't be so aggressive. Use your words. Keep that stuff down, right? Like, and then I get into teenage years and I'm like, I'm a naturally aggressive person. I'm not mean, but like if we're going to play a game, I want to win. Sure. I like to wrestle around and whatever. And then wrestling gave me this outlet for this aggression. And I remember even like when I think about our wrestling coaches that were there, a lot of us, we didn't have super active fathers in our homes, and some of our coaches became kind of like another male role model that we could look up to, who wasn't our father. He wasn't judging us because we were his kid, which sometimes that could be a negative thing because people have this possessive attachment, like my kid's got to do good, right? Well, he wasn't. He was just pushing us because he liked us as a coach, whatever. He wanted to push us to get better. Right. But a lot of times, like, I was talking to a guy who runs a wrestling program about this the other day. Those experiences like that changed my life. And jiu-jitsu, the same thing, changed my life. And just, it's the not just the art of it itself, but also the people that led you through it along the way that were really helpful. And so I think it's important for people to go through something because, again, we don't need to go out into the wilderness and like knock out a tooth to identify with some deity or whatever, right? This is like one of the rituals, right?
Yeah.
Where they would I think I forgot which group it was, but they would basically take their young men that were going to become like full men, full warriors, and they would knock out one of their teeth, like one of their tooth. Because what it was is in their mythology, there was one of their gods had a tooth missing from one of his adventures, and so it was to remind them that God is in them too.
Yeah.
Right. And so basically, it was a reminder that every time their tongue like flicks around in their tooth, that they have that within them. You know, that person's there. We don't have to do that, of course, but we do have to remind people that like that power is in you. You know, like when someone goes and wins a tournament and like they realize that they have an ability in them that they didn't know was there, that lets them know they have the power. You have the power in you. Right, like you're looking for it from someone else. No, you have it. You know, like when a woman goes, a lot of times when we're talking about aggression, women get that their aggression gets stomped out. Right, like you're not supposed to be.
Yeah, you're definitely not supposed to be aggressive. You know, based on society's standards.
Because you know, if you're a man, if you're aggressive, you're a toxic asshole. If you're a woman, you're aggressive. You're a bitch. Right, like because we're just supposed to just be nice and timid. You know, but it's not a good idea. And you see these women sometimes where they'll come in and they'll train, and then they get this. They've told me like they have a forcefulness that's not mean, but they're able to, because of the fact that they know that they're tough, because they know they have physical confidence, and they this forcefulness allows them to be more have more of a backbone when it comes to stuff outside of the gym. Guys too, same thing. You'll have these guys come in that are very timid, and they start to unlock that aggression and bring it out. Not that they become ultra aggressive, but they learn that like, hey, I have it if I need it. And so again, it's not necessarily about knocking out a tooth, but it is about taking a person through some initiation point, some ritual where you make them realize that there are deeper sides of themselves that they didn't know about, and there's power in them that they didn't know about it, and that's what you're doing. You know, and I mean, to me, as a coach, it's kind of what you do on a deeper level. You know, yes, you're teaching people how to do that, but again, you're teaching them, hey, listen, you have the ability. It's not me doing it. Like, I'm going to teach you stuff. I'm going to guide you through it, but ultimately, you have to have the ability to do this stuff. It's not me. Like if you go win a tournament, like I taught you maybe some of this stuff, but you did it, not me.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm guiding you through it.
You know, it resonates with jiu-jitsu so much because it's difficult.
Yeah. I mean, combat sports in general.
They're difficult. Like it's not easy. It's not like, okay, I can do this thing and you know, and anybody can do it. You know, we've talked and I've thought about this, you know, we talked about with Joe Armento, one of our coaches and one of our brown belts, is jiu-jitsu for everyone? No. And in many instances it's not, and that's what makes it special too, because I would think, you know, I think that my mentality is jiu-jitsu is good for everyone. I think it'd be great for everyone to do jiu-jitsu because you experience a struggle and it's not easy, and, and it challenges you in many ways, mentally, physically, emotionally. You know, it addresses your resiliency as a person. You know, if you get submitted pretty early on, like how do you bounce back? Or like during a roll, do you know, curl up and sit in the corner? Do you just stop training? Do you go get more aggressive? I mean, it exposes a lot of things. And so I think jiu-jitsu is so great for that, because not everybody can do it, and it's fucking hard to do. And if you get good at that, then you know, okay, I can get good at something difficult. Yeah, and then that's when things are difficult, I can probably conquer those or get good at them, or at least have a game plan to try to learn more about it. Because, you know, so much of jiu-jitsu is learning positions and finding your own kind of unique jiu-jitsu flavor, you know, what you like to do. Like we said, all of us at the gym have different specialties, so to speak. You know, we got some guys that are really good at ankles and foot locks and stuff, and some guys are good at, you know, lapel guards, and you're good at, you know, certain, like taking the back and certain type of guard passing.
And by doing that, what have you taught that person?
Well, they can be individuals.
You have the power.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so if you learn a difficult skill, you know that I can do something, you know, because that's what wrestling gave me. It's what jiu-jitsu gave me. Like, then it was like, okay, like, for instance, like, you know, with jiu-jitsu, I got really good at it. Okay, cool. Then it was like, okay, like business related. Oh, okay, I got to get better at business.
Yeah.
Because we, you know, had a business, but didn't know shit about business. What am I going to do? I'm just going to do daily work just like I do train. Like I'm going to train every single day. Or train
get obsessed.
Yeah,
you get obsessed.
Well, you basically create habits around doing that thing. So basically every single day I do something related to learning or implementing learning related to the business, with jiu-jitsu, all these things. It becomes like brushing my teeth. If I don't do it, I feel dirty. I feel like something's wrong. So like last night, for instance, my day went terribly. I had a bunch of crazy stuff going on with trying to get some money to a manufacturer to get some gis and stuff made. And I stayed at the gym until about 11 o'clock last night because I had to get a few things done. And the day wasn't over, and I still had to get them done. So I wasn't leaving. I was like, I'm not done until I'm done. Yeah. Usually I'm out of the gym by like 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock, whatever, depending. But I was like, I had to be there. So I was there for a couple extra hours because it had to be done because, again, I know the process. And it ain't always a fun one, right? Everybody likes to see the end result, but it's not always a fun process. But you have to go through that. And so when you realize that, like, okay, this is what it takes. I got it in me, but here's what it's going to take. Then you realize that you have it within you. And then, I mean, really a powerful thing is just like understanding that as long as you're moving forward, even if you're going the wrong direction, as long as you're moving, you're good. It's when you stop. Like that's when, that's atrophy.
That's when shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when, you're right, atrophy. It's a great example.
It's when you
waste away. Like your atrophy of your muscles, like when you don't do anything, they kind of waste away. And you're constantly like, it's so much harder to stop and then start again too, in a lot of aspects. So
yeah, because then you have expectations.
That, and it's also just like think about momentum. Think about how much effort it takes to actually stop.
Yeah.
But if you kind of move forward and you never, it's kind of like I always think of gas mileage in a car. Start stop versus just going kind of at a consistent pace. Or turning your car off and then turning it back on type thing. You're so you're more efficient and you're greased, you're working, you're moving more.
Yeah, when you're consistent.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, you learn that through like, however you learn it. It's not just jiu-jitsu, it's everything, right? It's all kind of the same. There's no shortcut around it. There's no way around it. Like that's the ticket. And when someone realizes that, and it's a different thing to understand it, to know it, and then to have felt it, right? You can say this to someone and they'll say, yeah, I get it. I got to do this every day.
Yeah.
But then they don't do it. But then you get someone who's felt the power of that, felt it. It's different. Knowing it. This is why like the internet's so full of bullshit. Like there's people that know stuff and they'll regurgitate stuff, but they've never actually done it. They haven't felt it. Like they haven't actually done it full speed. Like they haven't actually realized that in themselves. They're just basically saying it because it sounds good. They saw a meme of it and they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to use this, right? But it's a different thing when you go through it and you feel it. And then you're like, oh, that's what it is. You know what I mean? And again, it changes things. Even like the idea of going to jiu-jitsu where you submit yourself to a higher person, right? So instead of looking around you, you look up. Instead of looking horizontally around you, you look up. That's a different thing. Because you look around you, everybody's like, oh, what's he doing? What's he doing? What's he doing? Like what are those people with more experience? What are they doing? And then you seek those people out. Like, I mean, I've talked about this numerous times. I've paid people money or, like hounded people, like messaged them and things like that to try to get hold of them. Traveled, like plane ticket, just to get down there to meet the people, just to have lunch with them, just to go over stuff. Give me some details. You know what I mean? Like I'm there to learn, you know. That's a different thing. And so, I mean, again, I got that from wrestling where I was like, okay, if I want to be better at this, I have to seek out people that are better than me so I can learn from them.
Right.
Okay. So then I'm going to go seek out people that are, to learn from, and whatever they tell me, I'm going to soak it in and I'm going to try to implement it like ruthlessly, and do some sort of daily habit to it. This is true for jiu-jitsu or anything. Yeah.
And that's how integration as well of a new skill. You have to like basically make it a habit, make it into, part of your daily routine.
It has to be.
Well, yeah, like we were talking about, with Lachlan, we were talking about, how exactly he has implemented his leg lock system and his leg lock game. And like, he basically got himself in he found something that was kind of by being detail-oriented researching. Is that he's got I think a PhD or something, and he researched. He had to do a research study, and so I think he took that into different aspects of his learning, and he researched look at positions. Oh, I wanted to be good at leg locks, but all these leg locks stem from this one, or they end up here. How can I bridge that gap from this position to leg locks?
Yeah. Which
is more kind of the path that's kind of gravelly, not well paved, and then people are like, what is he doing over there?
Yeah.
I want to head over there. Yeah. And that was a great example. Like you're changing up, some of the circumstances, some of the environment, and it can change. It can muddle, like make somebody that's really good at something kind of confused a little bit because it's not the way it's been done. He's doing it differently.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. So, yeah, I think that's an interesting thing to think about. Like, and again, I'm not saying that this is right, but I think there's something to it about what are some of the deeper reasons that people train. Like, what is it? Because I know that some people come in there just, I'm coming in here to do this. But I think that when people look through it, when they've had those transformative experiences that they can speak of, that's when you're like, well, what's the deeper cause to that? What's the deeper reason? And how does that parallel with things that have happened before, right? Because this is nothing new. The structure that we're in has been done by numerous things, so it's like, why is that so important? Why does that work? And how does that impact us? I think understand the deeper reasons to that's kind of important. It's useful.
I'm kind of interested in why people come in initially to train and then how that changes over time. Like what it starts as, like, I want to be an MMA fighter or whatever, and then what it turns into is kind of different. People start for one reason, but sometimes they stick around for a different reason.
Yeah, and like, why do people want to be a fighter? Like, why would you want to be a fighter? I mean, like this again goes to it, like where some of the people that some of the books I've read, that will talk about, like, when you see a kid beginning to like get spiky, like, this is because they were writing it in, like, the early 90s and stuff, when the kid gets spiky hair and stuff like that, basically, or when they start joining in
attention,
start joining gangs, they're looking for the initiation. Because it typically, like, it hits around puberty, and typically, like, that's when kids would have been initiated by the tribesmen, or the tribeswoman into their new role in the tribe. You've now been initiated into whatever your role is going to be, and they don't get that, so they start to, like, lash out. They start to do crazy stuff because they're searching for something. You know what I mean? Like, and again, these didn't always exist, like these sorts of situations, right? They're a relatively new phenomenon, because a lot of times before, like, the Industrial Revolution stuff, the kid would have grown up, he would have been working with dad on the farm. You've been working with the elders, the older people, learning from them, figuring out what they did, right? You wouldn't have been, like, sitting around with mom and dad at work and you're kind of left to your own devices, like, what do I want to do? I'm going to watch TV. I'm going to watch TV and have TV feed me violence and sexuality and all this stuff, and at an incredibly young age, and you're learning stuff that you probably shouldn't learn about. Yeah. And then, it's just, that's a relatively new phenomenon that didn't exist years ago. You look at, like, the types of stuff that we deal with. It wasn't always there. Not saying it wasn't there at all, but it wasn't there like it is now.
In the same capacity. Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. But jiu-jitsu, is... I don't know. It's a strange, unique community, and I think the uniqueness of it drew me in initially, like, because it was kind of wasn't something that a lot of people did.
That's what you should ask yourself. You should journal about that. You should sit there, or even just go for a nice long walk and sit that question in your head. Why did I start training? And think about why, because a lot of times you probably had, like, a very base reason as to why. Well, I saw the UFC and I want to learn jiu-jitsu.
That's right.
That's the very, like, superficial reason. There's something else going on. I don't think it's as simple as that, because I look at my own, like, start in wrestling, and when I got into wrestling and jiu-jitsu and all those things, at first I was like, I want to be a fighter, is what I thought.
Sure.
Right? When I look back at it, there was so much more going on there. I mean, like, it was the only place where I had felt connected to people, because in school I wasn't, like, cool. I was a geek, I had some friends and stuff, but in wrestling, like, I remember, like, that communitas. There were the cool kids, the dorky kids, the prom kings, and the whatever, all on same footing, right? And, like, it didn't matter. Like, we didn't like, it was the coolest thing, because back in high school we didn't measure each other by any of this stuff. Like when we were in football, you didn't have it as much, but wrestling, we would all sit around and we would, like, we'd all be sitting in our underwear waiting to weigh in or something like that. I remember we would, like, lift each other up, like things that you just didn't see in high school in that capacity, and then I remember that feeling feeling of togetherness. Like, when wrestling ended, I was depressed, like, super depressed. I'm like, well, something's gone. I'm missing. I feel lost. And then I got into jiu-jitsu and I felt it again, where, like, again, I didn't know anything about these guys. I didn't know what they did for work. I didn't know anything. But all I know is that we're doing this together, and that's cool. And everybody's lifting each other up. They're helping each other out. And it's a cool thing. And again, I think that was, for me, that was a big, deeper reason for that, was that I was like, I needed that. I needed to be in that phase of togetherness, that group community where I just haven't felt it anywhere else. And so it's like, I mean, to me, like that's been one of the big reasons. I mean, obviously I love the training. I love the complexity and the puzzle like of jiu-jitsu and trying to figure things out. I love it. I love rolling. But I would not have trained jiu-jitsu if it wasn't for that feeling of togetherness with people that cuts past the normal silly bullshit that we judge ourselves on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you know, like because you go into a gym, like it doesn't come up. Like what part of town are you from? Hey, like what color skin do you have? It just doesn't matter. We just don't care. We're just training. Like none of that stuff matters. We're just rolling.
And somebody that's
what got, like, I remember one night, dude, and sorry to interrupt again. I'm just buzzing with ideas now. But I remember there was one night I was, as a coach, 2013. I remember the gym was finally growing. We had a big mat. I remember I was watching. And I remember, like, it was one of these surreal moments. The hazy mist from all the sweat was coming up. It was in the middle of summer, and I'm just sitting back watching. We had like 40 dudes on the mat, women too. I say dudes, just 40 people on the mat. 40 people on the mat. We had, you know, Asian people, we had African Americans, we had white people, we had Hispanics. I mean, you had all that. Then we had, I remember there was a Jewish guy rolling with a Muslim. There was an atheist rolling with a Christian. There was a kid that was 16 years old that could beat the brakes off of adults, and he was. Like, I mean, you just had this big mixture of people, men and women, all this stuff. And it was like, we're doing the same thing. Just doing the same thing, and that's cool. And we could all be cool with that. And I think that that's a cool thing because, you know, for our world to I mean, like Joseph Campbell talked about this, like we've lost mythology, right? We've lost that. And the mythology it acts as a glue for culture, right? Without that mythology, it starts to fall apart, which is, you see it happening right now. Like it's breaking down into chaos, which chaos has to happen before the order can be reestablished, right? And chaos, order, chaos, it always kind of goes back and forth. You know, you think of even jiu-jitsu, you're in the order. You come in, it's chaos when you're rolling, and then it's back to order, right? Like anyway. But with that, like he says, like you've got to have some sort of like worldwide mythology. You have to have something that works as a glue for everybody because the world's small now. It's not big. You know, like, I mean, you think about, I could literally, it blows my mind when you think about this. I can go Lachlan, we just got done talking to him.
Yeah.
I go get on a plane and I could be there like within about a day and a half.
Yeah.
Right? You couldn't have done that. I could be in California. Remember the settlers going out west and they're all dying like along the way? I could be in California in 4 hours.
I know.
That's crazy. Like it blows my mind that that's possible. So like, or we can talk to people online. I can share videos online through. I mean, imagine trying to tell your great grandparents. So I'm going to talk to people, and there's this thing. You know, have you ever seen a computer? I think I've seen computers. Those big things that they have at the campuses. Yeah, that thing. Well, I'm going to punch some stuff into that, and I'm going to talk to people across the world through things called email. Well, email, what's that? Like, how long does it take to get the mail? You know, or I'm going to make a video. Like, you know, the TV. Yeah, okay. I'm going to make videos of me talking about stuff. Really? Like, you know, it blows your mind.
Or talk to somebody real time and watch them the same time.
Talk to them, right? I mean, like doing what we just did with Lachlan, where we're talking. I remember watching one of these. I was watching the Aliens movies, and like you look at the technology that they're using that's so furistic, and it's like, dude, like
this is run of the mill stuff.
Yeah,
now.
It's not even. This is bad technology. I was like, they're like they had like a FaceTime like technology where they're talking on the phone. I'm like, it looks terrible. It's like our technology is so much better than that, you know. But you look at the idea behind it, like we couldn't even comprehend what's going on now. And so you think about that, like the world's a different place, and I feel like, you know, learning to, and I feel like this is done purposely, but people try to, you know, and I know it's done purposely if you look up some of the stuff, but there are people that do things purposely to separate people, to keep them separate. Because if you have a group of people that no longer look at each other as separate, but we're all in the same sort of thing, because it's so stupid, right? You think about the fact that so many people divide themselves by the most minute stuff. You know, it's like, because you look at people, we're like leaves on a tree, right? Like we're just leaves that randomly got put up on a tree. You know, and some leaves are getting more sun, some are not. Yeah, it's not the damn leaves' fault. You know, like they were just born on a different side of the tree, you know, like, but it doesn't mean that it's a bad leaf. It just means they got born on the shady side. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that sun's going to rotate and they're going to get their sun, and eventually you're going to be in the darkness too. you know, and at the same time, we're all connected to the same damn thing. We see ourselves as separate, but we come from the earth from food that our mothers, ate, and come from the womb. And when we die, we go back to the earth. Yeah, we're connected to the damn thing. And I know that I don't want to sound like a new age hippie or anything, but when you think about it, that's what it is. We go back to the earth. We don't we decompose. You know, like we decompose and go back into this damn thing, and then cycles around. Rebirth, right? So it's like we're not that different. When you get to people, when you get to meet them in a place like that, where it's like it cuts through that silly stuff, like you realize, like, hey, that Muslim guy, he's cool. Like he doesn't seem like he's gonna like do something bad, right? Or hey, that guy that's a Christian, like he's not barking at me about like how I need to pray to God or anything like that. He's a nice guy. Or that like. That one guy over there, I mean, whatever, that guy that lives in the other part of town that I would have never ever come in contact with, he's a cool guy, so it's just something that we, I think it's something society desperately needs is more things where it doesn't have to be jiu-jitsu, but more things where people can come together in a situation where you're equal. We're not judging each other. We're like, look, we're in here for the same reasons. We're doing this one shared thing, and through that we can then look at each other in a different light. Yeah,
and then you have like one thing that is kind of fascinating. You have these adults or these grown men or grown women that are older, experience so much life and so many different things throughout their lives, and they come in and you have somebody like it's a younger, purple belt or brown belt, and they can teach them. Like you can teach, and everybody's kind of learning, and it doesn't matter what you've kind of accomplished, but like, well, it's just you're kind of putting things up on like you're flipping things up on their head. You have younger people teaching older people,
but not necessarily because while the younger person can teach them, the younger person's learning too. Right. Because like for me, like being around like a bunch of guys in the gym who were older than me and had way more experience in other things, I learned a lot from those dudes. Sure. Right. So yes, I'm teaching them jiu-jitsu.
Well, in jiu-jitsu, yeah.
But they're exchanging information through the process because now I get to know them and they're saying, hey, by the way, this. Like, by the way, this. Like, so yes, I'm giving them this, and then they're giving me this.
But
so
in regular society, you walk in and and if you're 35 and somebody's a 16, like you've experienced a lot more life than they have, they're not going to be able to teach you a ton of stuff.
Right. And a lot of times a 16-year-old's not going to listen. Yeah. I mean, think about that, because a lot of times like a 16-year-old's not going to listen. Like, man, screw you. I'm 16 years old, whatever. I know everything. But in a jiu-jitsu sense, it cuts through the silly stuff, and then you can sit there and talk to people, and because you're in the group communitas, you're on equality, you have that togetherness, and you're not looking to one up people. You don't have that same level of resistance towards everyone where you're like constantly whatever, and that's why, and again, that's why it's so important. Like, it's not about like not having an ego, because we all have an ego. Yeah, it's about losing it to the degree like that it interrupts that group connection. Like if you get a guy in the gym that like starts getting crazy and like thinks he's better than certain people instead of thinking he's just a part of them, that's a problem, because then that disrupts the group, that disrupts the way that the group feels, because now that togetherness is broken because you don't feel together. Yeah. You know that guy's intentions are not good for the group, they're good for him and him only. You know what I mean? And so you have to, that's something that it's why it's important. It's not about not having an ego. It's about just making sure that you have a healthy one and that you're playing with it in a useful way that's good for everyone.
Yeah. And, obviously learning, supporting others, supporting each other, and you're relating to each other too. Mm-hmm. You're relating through jiu-jitsu, which I think is great, because when sometimes you see somebody that, is from a different part of town or a different financial background or a different family background, you sometimes have a hard time relating. But the reason why all of us have all these different aspects of our lives can come together, we relate. And so jiu-jitsu is, like you said, it's the catalyst. It's the thing we relate with. It starts that process, and then you grow out from that. So
yeah, you have a common glue that brings you together. Yeah, and through that you realize that you're probably more similar to the people that you don't know than you think.
One of my favorite MMA fighters was Genki Pseudo, and he would have that.
We're all one.
Yeah, he had that huge flag, so we were all one. Yeah. And he's one of my favorite fighters. And
he's a bright dude.
Yeah.
Like, have you, because he's like, I feel like he was like a classically trained musician, like a pianist or something like that. I don't know. Like he's
cool. He did really weird stuff, like for this time, like he did really weird like things in a tournament or in a fight. He would kind of do unconventional like movements. He'd start like dancing and stuff. And then he was one of the originators of like those crazy walkouts and those dances and stuff.
His walkouts were amazing.
He was awesome.
I was so bummed when the UFC when they started to make the walkouts very boring. You know, it would just be like they just shove them in through the little hallway. I was like, that's terrible. Like, because I think that's one of the things that a lot of us loved about Pride was the pageantry.
Yeah.
You know, and it was like they put those fighters on a showcase. I mean, and granted, it's probably smart for the UFC, right? Like it's just like the NFL where they try to make sure that the players don't become too big, because then you can do what Conor McGregor does, right? He can kind of like, you know, boss people around.
But they kind of want that though. Like I think they had Israel Adesanya, who's like the middleweight champion. He did like this whole like dance thing.
I mean, but to me, they need to bring back and make it more like it was with pro wrestling. Because I mean, originally that's where they got it from, right? Like, is they had those walkouts and the whole thing. I mean, that was so cool. It's like they should definitely have that. I mean, I think it's like such a good thing because it's pageantry. It allows the fighters to, you know, show some. It gives them another opportunity to show their originality,
right?
You know, and honestly, I mean, to me, watching those fighters come out like that was way more exciting than like watching some guy being shoved with like 3 other dudes surrounding him, being shoved into the ring in a crowded hallway. Like, I was very bummed when they got rid of that. I was like, man, like that sucks.
I think they still do some things like allow for some little special things, but yeah,
but it's hard.
Well, I think,
because I mean, if a guy like, for instance, if Genki Pseudo came out now, his like if he came out in that geisha costume that he had, probably would have got his wig snatched off, and like, I mean, because people are just grabbing stuff and reaching, and like and it's like you can't express, because he did with one, he tried to, and it's like he kind of did a little bit at that very like when he got to the ring, but I was like, man, like that, it's not to me, just it's like we were talking to Lachlan, right? Like pump it up. Yeah. Like you got you got this world's thing, right? Pump these dudes up.
Dude, yeah.
Like when you bring these guys to the ring, that's a great opportunity for pageantry.
Build the excitement.
Yeah, and I mean, you could probably lose the pyrotechnics and stuff like that. You don't have to have it all the time, right? Because I'm sure it'd be expensive. But I mean, they're making money now.
Sure.
You know, it's like, so you have the money, and I mean, to me, like pump those dudes up and let them stand out for a little bit, because it'll help people remember them.
Because there's a lot, and like we were talking about these kind of unknown guys. Like, I mean, you remember Marcelo Garcia? Nobody knew who the hell he was. He came in and started just like destroying people. Eddie Bravo, same thing. I think it was ADCC when he
beat Hoyler.
He beat Hoyler, and we're like, who the hell is that guy? You know, and it's cool to see those things because you kind of get this legend started, and like, cause like, you know, it's cool. But there's so many now. There's so many more competitors, so it's kind of hard to, you know, in a way, it's harder to stand out. First, because there's so many more people that train, but also there's a larger lens on it now. Like there's a lot more notoriety and more publicity and things like that. So
yeah, I mean, it's just like fighting. Like there's so many fighters now compared to used to be. Too many UFCs.
Tons.
We have too many events. Like it's just there's so many events, and like they're so late now. For if you're in an Eastern time zone and you go to sleep reasonably early, it's rough, man. Like, you know, I've talked to several guys.
Hard to stay awake.
I've talked to a lot of old timers, you know, that are a little bit older now. They can't watch it.
I can't either.
I was like, I want to see the fights because they're good fights, and I can't watch it.
Sure.
You know, like it's just like, because I'm like, man, like I can't. I literally cannot stay up unless I drink coffee.
Yeah.
And I don't want to drink coffee and then be wired up and then screw my whole sleep.
Not be able to train the next day.
Yeah, you know. So it's like I don't know why they did that. To me, it's like it was working fine. You know, I'm sure there's a reason. I'm sure I'm uneducated about it. So I'm sure
it's probably about pay-per-view buys.
Yeah,
trying to you don't want it so early.
God, the pay-per-view buys are so silly now. You got to go through like 2 paywalls or something now.
You don't want it so early because a lot if it's on the West Coast, if it's too early, then people aren't going to show up.
Yeah,
but if it's too late, then it's going to be way too late in the East Coast. So they think they found that little demographic. Like it's like 5 o'clock.
Well, it's 6 o'clock East Coast. Or no, it's 7 o'clock.
It's like 5 o'clock.
Well, because they don't start the fights here until like 10 now.
10.
Yeah, so it's 3.
But prelims, think about prelims start at like 6.
Yeah, they're early.
Like 6:30 prelims will start on the East Coast. That's like 3:30 on the West Coast.
Yeah,
that's
but
crazy.
I mean, but like shit. I mean, man, like a lot of people don't even go to the prelims. They just want to see the main events.
Man, I loved going to the prelims.
I think they're great.
It's the most fun.
If you're a fighting fan, but if you're just someone that like wants to go to the event, you know what I mean? Like, so for instance, like someone that, when people would go to like see like Mike Tyson in Holyfield or something.
You wouldn't go see all the undercard.
You would if you're a boxing fan, but if you're just some casual person that wants to see a fight, you're going to go see that like a couple of the last fights. So that's what you're going to see. You know what I mean? So it just depends on the person.
Yeah. Tangent. Here we go. We're off. We started with something totally different.
We started off with something very different.
So.
All right, guys. So that's the end of the podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully you got something from that. If you guys again, if you're either following me on Instagram or if you're one of the Patreons or whatever, if something about that episode struck a chord with you, where we were talking about some of those deeper subjects, shoot me a message. Shoot me a Patreon message. Shoot me an Instagram or Facebook message or email. If you're on the email newsletter, email me. A lot of times the emails are probably the ones I check the most. But shoot me a message. Let me know. I would be curious as to see what you guys think about it. Because, again, this is an idea that I'm studying right now that I find very interesting and useful. And so I'm always curious what people think about it and how they experience things, especially for some of you guys that are closer to the beginning of your start in jiu-jitsu. A lot of you guys are much closer than I am to when I first started. I started back in 2003. So it's been a while. Started wrestling back in 2000. So almost 20 years. Yeah. It's crazy.
It's a little bit.
19 and a half years.
I just got a Facebook thing that says that when I got my blue belt, it was like 2010.
2010. Mm-hmm. I remember
absurd.
that. Yeah, summer of 2010. It was
Hadn't seen
Matt,
that long.
You, Big Matt Cole,
Yep.
Adam, and Robert was there.
Robert?
He was very
Yeah.
small. He was
Rob looked totally different.
Little skinny Rob. Yeah, I remember that.
That's crazy, man. How long ago that was.
Let's see, it goes fast.
I know.
So, guys, thank you so much for listening.
We appreciate
If you want to support the podcast, you already know all those advertisements we put at the beginning. So, support us if you want to. And if not, keep listening. Talk to you guys next time.
Bye.